Welcome everyone. How is it going? I got a familiar face here with me, Herbert, who you obviously recognize from Brighter with Herbert, posting 4, 5, 6, sometimes Tesla videos a day. Herbert is the champion when it comes to Tesla content. And I've had him, it's been a while, Herbert, since you've been back on the channel,
Yeah.
and I wanted to get you back on because just to preface everything right now, it is so wild out there in terms of Tesla. Like there's a million different narratives to chase. There is FSD, there is the state of the stock, there's Elon and politics and Doge, there's robotics we can talk about. There's your viral tweet last night that we'll get into. But I wanted to kind of go over everything as the state of Tesla stock currently and get your thoughts because you are probably the most connected Tesla influencer there is, because you talk to so many different facets of people out there that I think your opinion on this is super valuable. But first and foremost, welcome back to the channel. Really
Oh,
glad to have you back
thank you
on.
so much, Yashu. I absolutely love you and been following you for forever. And this is, this is great. You're the stock expert, actually. But you're right. That one of the things I get to, have as a unique position in the Tesla community is I interview as many people as possible. I probably interview more people than others have. And then from that reason, I am every single day. I watch every single tweet. I watch every single video. I follow every single news.
Yeah.
And then I get to talk to somebody every day who tell me what their opinion is. And so at some point, I kind of am able to repeat what most people are saying, or some people are saying, or who I think has the right opinion. And that's sort of the role I play.
Yeah, no, and I love it, and you do a great job at it. So let's get into, I guess, first and foremost, the most topical part of this conversation, which is Tesla's current price and the reaction that we've seen in the last little bit. I think the best way to kind of surmise what we've seen so far, and I'll pull up the stock chart just for everyone to see,
Yeah.
352 sitting on Tesla. It's really almost the undoing of the Trump premium is probably the best way to put it now.
Hmm. Okay, that's quite interesting. I mean, yeah, you tell me where did you see the stock prior to the November 5th, and then where it is now, and what do you are you just saying the drop amount, or are you saying that we're back
Well,
to where we were?
well, I guess really, I
And
mean,
we're not. Yeah.
green
Go.
glasses, I mean, we are much higher than we were pre,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
that is 100% true. But what do you think has contributed to the downfall in the last month and a half here?
Yeah, so this is where I think is interesting. As I interview a bunch of people, this is what I'm hearing, right? You have this flip between the retail investor who's been very, very excited about the stock, right? And then the institutional investors who've just been saying that this is a car company for so long. And then they had start talking about it as an energy company. And then, of course, when the Trump win happened, then that's when all of a sudden you start hearing the institutional investors flip their tune and start saying, well, I think the reason why it's now going to succeed is because of the regulatory framework is going to be in favor of Tesla's launch of autonomy. So they were like trying to say that the reason why Tesla stock is not worth autonomy is because of regulation rather than the fact that the technology is working, versus us Tesla retail investors who really always believe that the product is the FSD is on track to succeed. Now, in the last week or two, when the stock started to fall, I asked this question to people, and what they're saying is it's flipped, isn't it? Institutional investors are sticking with their higher stock price targets. I think most of them are now over 450 as they raised their price targets as the stock went up. And as the stock fell, a few of them, I think maybe I've only seen one, have changed their stock price lower and saying, oh, it's no longer going to win autonomy. They are still believers in autonomy. So why did the stock fall? I don't know. But most people, like this morning, I asked James from Invest Answers. He says that it's weak retail hands who are falling off, not the institutional folks who are doing this. And there's people who are saying that, well, his involvement in Doge is causing this, people abandoning the stock. And we can talk a little bit about that, whether or not you think that people are dropping the stock because of politics and they can no longer follow because of their moral compass to invest in Tesla or Elon, or do you think it's kind of a wash between the two? But the reason why it fell the last several days, most are saying to me, is because of this belief that Elon's going to invest $97.5 billion in OpenAI, and that's going to be a significant amount of money he'll have to sell stock, Tesla stock, to buy. It's a reminiscent of what happened with Twitter.
Hmm.
And of course, this morning, the news came out that says that the lawyer of Elon basically said that we're not really wanting to sell it, but we will if they commit. We don't necessarily have to buy the company as long as they just commit to not it being nonprofit. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, what's your
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
well,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
interesting because it's such a confluence of so many different things. You're right. It's not one thing specifically that's, causing Tesla with the reaction that we've seen. You know, to be fair, I guess there is a degree of narrative out there, whether media driven or not, where it's pretty anti Tesla and Elon. But
yeah.
I think I agree with you that it's not, I don't think it's a direct reaction to the stock price. I think what happens is the juice kind of comes out of out of the orange a little bit when you have such a concerted attack towards Elon and Tesla. So it's not necessarily even people that are selling. It might even just be short sellers that are preying on negative headlines that come out. And when the sentiment is low, buyers really, I mean, they're probably just not going to step up and outsized buy, especially at the levels that we were seeing at 480 hitting all time highs. That being said, we've seen a pretty good rebound here in the last little bit, in the last day and a half here, back to 350. As we were, as low as like 320 essentially, sitting on Tesla just yesterday. So, at the end of the day, the volume profile on Tesla between 3 and 400 is pretty illiquid. Like, there's not a lot of people that are sitting with cost bases within
Right.
that $100 range. So what
Yeah.
that means is going up, it can be an elevator ride up, but it can also be an elevator ride back down because there's just not a lot of price discovery that's happened within that level. That's not going to be the case now. We've spent the last little bit here between those ranges. So I guess what do you think? Like, do you think for the next 4 years we're gonna continually talk about this every single week and what Elon has done and who he's pissed off now? Do you think this will
Yes.
be a 4 year? Yeah, I guess that's good for content.
Yes, of course we will. There's no doubt about it that, Elon's daily antics is always going to be the big thing. I mean, that's good and bad news for Tesla, right? There's going to be a lot of haters and a lot of people who admire him. And just to be clear, my focus and attention on the business and the product, and I admire the inventions of robotaxi, the robots, AI, the business models that Tesla is doing is unprecedented. I would go out and say that he's the best entrepreneur in the history of, you know, some people say can't say that, compared to Steve Jobs or compared to Ford or whatever.
Mhm.
No, it's Tesla for sure,
Yeah.
or Elon for sure. Um, but so yeah, it's gonna be a wild ride, and so that's where it comes right back to, right, are these inventions, and I started calling them inventions just to make it so much clearer when I'm talking to people. These
Yeah.
are inventions that
Mhm.
are going to, if the invention works, it's going to revolutionize an entire market, disrupt the market that is the largest market that's ever been addressed before. The potential for robotaxi if once it gets down to 25 cents per share. Now, it'll take a while to get to 25 cents per mile of cost. It is so big that it's bigger than any other industry that's out there. And
Mm.
then you add robots on top, which is even bigger than that, right? So yeah, that's
So you're saying you got to be able to look through the noise and find the signal here a little bit.
yeah, of course. And it, like I have this conversation with folks right now, which is, so first of all, do you think that the stock price today is falling because of the fundamentals of the company and because we're expecting lower vehicle sales in Q1, lower
Mm.
margins? I had a guy a couple days ago telling me that that's why it's falling, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't think so, because when the Q1 results came out, it was really bad fundamentals for Tesla, and yet the stock went up.
Yeah.
And again, if you listen to the narrative of the investors, the big whale investors, they're saying that it's not a car company anymore. We're waiting to see if robotaxi works.
Yeah.
So do you think that this, and so anyways, my comment to folks right now is, if you believe that the drop in vehicles and the drop in sales is equivalent to the rise in robotaxi, then okay, I get what you're saying. But if you realize that the rise in robotaxi, if it works, is so much like magnitudes bigger than a small drop in the sales, that it's like, just weigh it out, decide if that matters to you or doesn't matter to you right now.
Hmm.
And then, so I think the big question, of course, is robotaxi going to happen? Is FSD going to work? And
Yeah.
when is it going to happen? That's the big question we need to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's get into that in a quick second. I just wanted to share this before we get into FSD talk. Just for context, like, where Tesla is sitting at right now, in the last 5 days, down 5%. Within the last month, down 13%. Obviously, ugly month here. Last 6 months, though, trailing
Yeah.
6 months, that is, Tesla's up 70%, 69% actually. Year to date, yes, Tesla's down about 8%. In the trailing 1 year, Tesla's up 90. So it's almost like you can choose your own narrative here with what
Yeah.
you want,
Yeah.
depending on where you're pegging your
That's
arbitrary
a good
line in
point.
the sand. You
Hmm.
can find your narrative. If I wanted to say, look at Tesla, yeah, we're at 350, it sucks compared to 480, but hey, I mean, we're up like what, 100 or $200 here since we were last year this time. Okay, that's pretty good. And of course, 5 year, just forget about it. 558% up. We don't even have to go that far out. So this is what I think the state of the union is a little bit with Tesla investors, is that depending on where you draw the line in the sand, you can find your own narrative, and therefore you can find your own arguments online.
Yeah. When they hit 480 in December 16th, people are going, oh, it's going to be 500, 600 in January. It's going to be 700 to 1,000 by the end of this year, 2025. And that's not what happened in January, right? It fell. And just, it's like, who knows? This
Yeah.
narrative changes and, when. And what won't change is, again, what I call the inventions.
Mm.
If FSD works, then we're going to be a whole new level of, it won't be $300 to $500 range anymore, right? Maybe I don't know what the number would be, $700 to $1,000 range. That's where it'll fall from 800 to 600. And everybody's going to freak out, going, "What's going on with Tesla?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, let's talk about FSD now. So we were talking about
Yeah,
this before we hit the record button. You recently had a pretty
yeah.
a good story here with FSD at a personal level. Do you want to share more about that?
Sure, absolutely. So, okay, so as you know, you and I, we've been testing FSC from the very, very beginning, right? I'm one of the first, I think, the first 3,000 people that had the FSC beta 3 years ago, and it was important to me to be a beta tester because I love products, I love business, I want to be the very first to get the first iPhone, the first Twitter account, the first Gmail account, all these things. I want to test it. I want to understand the business. So I wanted to be one of the first FSD beta testers. But unlike all other beta testers, I didn't do videos. I didn't try to report on it on a daily basis. I just wanted to know whether or not every new release is improving or not. So my typical pattern for the last several years is I would get a new release, I would test it out for 2 weeks, and then I would not drive it anymore. So unlike everyone else who would say, well, you should drive it every single day, it adds to, helps with data. And that part I get. I should be driving it more just to help build the data set. But in my perspective, all I really wanted to do is understand, is the progress happening? How much was the progress and so forth? And then, of course, I'm just a data point. I get that whole, I understand stats, I understand that whole thing. So all this time, I've basically not really felt that FSD is solved. I clearly knew it wasn't solved yet, but I was big believer that the progress is tremendously fast and headed that way. And I can see because I was one of the first from, I remember the first day that I was doing it, right?
Hmm.
I can even tell you that drive that I had with my brother, and I was like, we were reporting things. So what happened this weekend though, so last 2 weeks I've been on FSC 13. FSC 13 was a massive jump over 12 and others. You
Yeah.
can already see we're on our way. But I kept getting a lot of self disengagements every time. And I had like one critical disengagement, only because I thought the car in front of me turned right away into a mall. And then it stopped because its butt was sticking out. And I didn't think that my car was going to stop in time. So I just stopped right away.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I thought, what's going on with my car? We got all these the sunlight warnings, the camera warnings. I have to clean the fronts. So finally, I understood that many of the new Model 3s, hardware 4 cars, they have this issue with the fog up the camera. And so I brought it to Tesla service last week. They cleaned it up. And since Wednesday last week, it's been perfect. Perfect every ride. Now, what blew us away was we went to Vancouver from Seattle. You live in Vancouver. And we drove 7 or 8 hours total driving time because we went to Vancouver 2.5 hours, went back home 2.5 hours, drove around Vancouver, and this car was flawless. And we're talking about different drives between the highways in Washington State and the city of Vancouver. And so in the highways, you would pass on. There's a rule where you cannot drive in the left far lane
Yeah.
unless you're passing. And then you
Right.
stay in the middle. The car did that perfectly all the time. And then I took over for a McDonald's drive-through. I took over for the charging station, and I took over for the Nexus. Otherwise, I just didn't take over anymore. And in Vancouver, right,
Wow.
this narrow streets, very, very busy both ways. And
Yeah.
so then if the car in front of you decides to turn left and you get stuck there, you're going to be waiting a bit until that guy sees an opening to get through, right?
Mm.
This car saw it before it actually happened, got to the right lane, flipped back to the left, sees it before it happens, and it's like it drives better than I did.
Mm.
So my wife was blown away because
Yeah.
we're talking about the entire ride just so smooth, fast, simple, safe. I couldn't believe that I drove for 8 hours and I didn't even do it. So again, it's a one data point. I'm not saying that you need to get to one critical disengagement. I think we're very close to one critical disengagement for a person driving for an entire year. I think we're not quite yet
Wow.
there. I think that that's where the next milestone is, right? A typical driver, 15,000 miles in a year, that you would have only one critical disengagement. In order to be safer than a human, you need to get to, I think, 70,000 miles before you get to one. So we're not quite there yet, but we're clearly, this is clearly robotaxi ready. If you just add a supervised a remote driver to take over if something like this happened, but I think we're really, really close at this point. So, anyways, we were just
Mm.
blown away by this.
That's an interesting tip about cleaning your cameras. Yesterday, I got 12.6.3 on my hardware model, my hardware
3.
3 Model 3 for the first time in so long. I've gotten an update. I drove it around a little bit. It was a lot smoother. I did have a camera calibration error, so I didn't click on it. I didn't have enough time, but I'm pretty sure it's going to tell me to clean something
Yeah.
because there must be one of my cameras dirty there. But it's a lot smoother. I test drove the Cybertruck recently as well, and
Yeah.
that had FSD 13 on it, and I used it, and it was so smooth. It did run a stop sign because the guy in front of me ran the same stop sign. That was one critical disengagement during my test drive. But other than that, I know running a stop sign is pretty critical, but that thing was next level smooth versus what I'm used to in my hardware 3,
Yeah.
Model 3. So I could definitely see it coming. And Elon, and I say deployment in our ticker here because so it sounds like you're pretty bullish on the June date sticking for the Austin robotaxi deployment. Is that right?
Absolutely. And here's why, right? So it's one thing when Elon says something, it's another thing when you hear the other
Mm.
executives say it. So Elon just recently, right, in an interview said that we're on track, or a tweet. He actually did a tweet. He said we are on track for rolling out June into Austin, and then multiple cities for this year. But then you had Franz, the chief designer, being interviewed by Jay Leno, and he said that we're going to have cybercabs in
Mm.
June.
Mm.
And people were saying, no, he might have said, he might have meant robotaxis and misspoke. No, the sentence before that was about cyber. He's talking about cybercabs, and
Mm.
then he says, and we'll have cybercabs in June.
Mm.
And then you had Ashok, or the other executives at, I think it was Ashok at the earnings call, also talk about June. So when you have these guys referring to a June rollout, and June is so close that it's
Yeah.
unlikely that they're not already ready. No, so that's one. And the second thing is
Okay.
he's already confirmed that. So we have thousands of cars today in the Fremont factory and soon Giga Texas. As they're coming out, they drive on their own to the parking lot. So these are already unsupervised rides being done, thousands of cars per day, right? And then he's already confirmed that employees have been using this, this robotaxi pilot. They've been doing it. And that rumor was happening even like 3 months ago, right? And then they're saying that that is still happening. They're using an app. So everything looks like that it's there. Now the question is FSD ready? And I'm telling you, just even what I was experiencing now.
Yeah.
By the way, if you listen to the co-CEO of Waymo, she said that we started first at grid cities,
Yeah.
right? And then you find out that, well, how many remote drivers do they have? They don't tell you.
Yeah.
But some of the data is showing that, like, I don't know, I haven't drilled into this, but Omar found some new data. And I think he said that 80% of drives have a remote driver. I don't know if that was for testing purposes or if that was realized, but there is no doubt in my mind that they have remote drivers. There's
Yeah.
a reason why they only have 700 cars and they're expanding to 1,000 cars. but why haven't they expanded to 5,000 cars or 10,000 cars?
Yeah. No,
Because
it's
the
exactly.
cost is so prohibitive to have. How many remote drivers do you need for every car?
Yeah.
Now, Tesla could have a remote, and I think that they will. You have to kind of launch with remote drivers. So if they wanted to, they can easily copy Waymo at this point for sure. So I guess it depends on what your definition is of what the launch is. Is it 200 cars? Is it like 1,000 cars? That we don't know yet. So I
Okay.
think that the launch in June is almost it's much more likely that it'll happen versus it not happening.
And I guess, let's talk high level, just economics of that. So let's talk robotaxi, not this year, not next, but let's say pie in the sky, blue sky projections a little bit. How are you seeing pricing of robotaxi, and how do you see that coming to the bottom line, just as a rough
Yeah.
estimate in terms of bull case, let's say?
Yeah, that's a great conversation. So we just saw the ARK Invest new drop of their research,
Mhm.
and they're saying that an Uber, Lyft, ride hail business is around 185 billion dollar market. Hmm. That's if you are charging $2 to $3 per mile. That's a human driven ride hail market. So Tesla comes in, matches that, then it's about $185 billion market. The question is, are they going to come in with $2 to $3 per mile equivalent to Uber? Because when Waymo offers theirs, they're pricing it higher than Lyft and Uber. And in San Francisco, in just a year and a half, Waymo is all of a sudden from nothing is now made Lyft and Uber, they're competing now, fall to the Lyft is Waymo is equivalent to Lyft at 20% market share in San Francisco. And then Uber lost some share, but they're still at 60%. But it proved that a robo taxi at higher price point than either of them actually got customers equivalent to Lyft. And then the debate I've been having with some people just literally a few days ago was, would Tesla come in and price it at $2 to $3? And I said zero chance. No, they're going to price it at $1. And then so Randy Kirk was saying, well, maybe they'll raise it at 2 to 3 because Tesla never always when they launch products they always charge at the high point and then they lower it later. I guess that's likely, and I'm just saying that you don't launch a robo-taxi product without it being a robo-taxi.
Hmm.
And a robo-taxi promise. Yeah.
So at those numbers, and we can have a debate on that, because I would actually disagree with you, at least to
Oh,
begin with.
yeah.
But that aside, what does the market penetration look like at that level? Like $1 or sub a
No, so
dollar?
once you get to dollar,
Yeah.
that's the ARK Invest analysis. You get to $1 trillion market. And then once you get to fit 25 cents, they're at like, some ridiculous $30 trillion market or something like that. Some massive unlocks of use cases that you couldn't ever think about before. Right.
Right.
So yeah.
So
Yeah.
at that level, obviously you're growing the market at that level. I actually think they're going to come in at par, if not higher. I think because at the start of a deployment, you can't have way too much demand, because people are going to be waiting around for
Oh, good
cars.
point. Yeah.
People are just going to have a bad experience. So you want to make it so where the market meets where the demand is. And so if someone requests a robotaxi, yeah, they're going to be paying maybe a little bit of premium, but they're going to get it right away. Versus if they come in really low and everyone wants it, people are waiting hours for it, and Tesla doesn't know exactly how it's going to work. So, but either way, it doesn't matter, because I don't think they're going to
Mm.
live there forever at that price point, even if it is higher to begin with. But robotaxi really is the next leg of Tesla's growth story, right? I mean, we've talked about robotics and Tesla Bot on your channel quite a bit. But are you still of the belief that robotaxi is the main driver for Tesla's business here in the short term?
Absolutely for the short term, for the next several months. But again, we can debate this. But I've been saying that I actually don't think the stock, as opposed to what's going to happen, it will respond to the bot before it will respond to robotaxi.
Okay,
and
let's dig
so
into that.
so what I mean by that is that robotaxi. So you had Elon say that we're going to dip our toes, and then we're going to dip our toes, and expand. So it could very well be that they launch a robotaxi offering in Austin, and they might just do, I don't know, we'll talk about 200 cars, 1,000 cars in Austin. How would the stock respond? Now, maybe people are going, oh, it's going to skyrocket. Well, it's going to be just like Waymo, right? Waymo has 7 cities. They already offer robotaxi. When does it become to the point where it's an absolute game changer. It's going to, Uber's already gone in the city. They've taken over that one city. If they're just dipping toes in and dipping toes in, maybe it might not actually be fully a full network until next year. And remember, he did say that customers like us who own model Teslas won't be able to add it or remove it from a network until the second half of next year. So it could very well be more like, yes, Tesla has a robo-taxi. Yes, they're doing it, but it's not quite this, I'm taking over a city yet, and they've really proven that they're just going to kill and tremendous addition to the revenue. As opposed to bots, by the end of this year, I think that, and by the way, if you ask the average consumer how big of a market is robotaxi, I don't think they really think it's that big of a deal. They might tell you, okay, it's like an Uber. An Uber's a big company. Yeah, okay. But they're not thinking it's going to be bigger than NVIDIA. But then if you see 1,000 bots, even if it's just 1,000, let's say 1,000 or 2,000 bots working various tasks all over Tesla's factory, like I've been asking Grok and other image generators, show me a picture with 1,000 bots in it. And they can't, right? They'll throw you a bunch, but it's like, you can't do 1,000 bots in one picture, right? But I want to see what is 1,000 bots. Now that's 1,000. What if it's 2,000? What if it's 3,000 bots? I think that imagery that people seeing all these bots working in a factory and all of them doing their jobs, doing a variety of different jobs, I think that's the one that's going to ignite everybody. And that's the one that's going to go up, because I think most investors, most consumers can understand that a humanoid bot is just dramatically massive, bigger market. I could be wrong here, but I'm just thinking that robotaxi is coming, but it'll be a slow drip before it becomes this. Like, and the other, that's a good question. When does a robotaxi become obvious? And Elon has said this several times, hasn't he? My car looks like your car. A Tesla Model Y is going to be used. But people don't know that he compared to a cat, that my cat can talk, but your cat can't. Like, they both look like cats, he said, right? And so, in fact, when you launch this, it's like, oh, it's cool. This car's picking me up, but it's not this magical thing. Now, if they use cybercabs, that's where it might look a little differently, because if cybercabs look differently.
Yeah.
But if it's a bot, something nobody's ever seen before, I think this is the one that's going to just, oh my God, what is this machine doing that's walking and talking? By the way, talking. We'll talk about this.
Yes.
These guys, the bots and the cars will be talking to you and you can talk to it back. But it's like, anyway, so that's just my opinion. Okay. I'm still a big believer that it's the bot that's going to drive the stock to jump 5 to 10x before. I'm not saying that robotaxi release is not going to make the stock jump. It will, but I just don't think it might be like a 2x, might be a 1.5x. I just don't think we're going to see the 5x.
Okay.
And you can debate me on this, because people say you won't get the 5x until you have actual earnings flowing, and you won't get that with bots until the following year. And then you might get that sooner with the robotaxis. So that part may be true. Yeah, but great point, by the way, about the price point, about you want the supply and demand. So how many cars do you think Tesla's going to come out with in June?
Oh, I mean, I would say less than 100 for sure. Like, I would say small scale to begin with. They have so many little things that they have to figure out, in my opinion, like charging, cleaning, logistics, next drive. They're going to figure it out, but they really got to probably take it slow, get all the gears going, oil the machine a little bit, and then deploy more. And yeah, I think that's also why we haven't heard much about the Cybercab in terms of manufacturing and production, maybe, is because they don't need that many of them. But you said this, and we can talk more about that at length. I know this tweet, this viral tweet, Herbert's viral tweet, I have it here. So
I don't know.
So Raj, who is actually, if you don't know, he's actually an AI, IT infrastructure, cybersecurity, and internal IT apps at Tesla, has a Tesla badge, verified on Twitter. He said the integration of AI agentic workflow across business processes and customer support looks promising. Customers will soon benefit from these enhancements. I read this and I was like, it sounds kind of like the AI wrote that tweet, to be honest. And then Herbert replied to that and he said, might you give a clue of one example we can look forward to? And he replies, voice AI agents integrated with internal apps provide personalized interaction. Can you talk more about this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what this is, but it could be Grok because you can see other people jumping. Is that Grok? Are you talking about Grok? And then just last night, Elon was interviewed, and he said that Grok 3 is going to come out in 2 or 3 weeks from now, right? It's pretty soon, 1 or 2 weeks, he said. So, voice AI agents is obviously something like a Grok, an LLM that you can talk to, that can talk to you back, but it's an agent, so it can actually make things happen and integrate. Now it says internal apps, so that's the part I don't know if he's talking about. Right? I'm a factory. By the way, that's the other thing that we learned recently. That they are absolutely using AI throughout the factory, and that's the part that Jeff and I have been asking, and clearly they have been, but we had confirmation that they really are using it now throughout the factory. So is he just talking about in the factory? But it makes most sense that if you're going to be able to do it in your factory app, your employee app, you're going to be able to use it in a Tesla. So what could this be, right? So first, I like that he called it an AI agent. Now, was he referring to an agent as in like this agent or agentic, right? Agentic AI is something that can actually do something.
Hmm.
And so if you ask the Tesla through Grok, hey, can you open the trunk? And it'll open the trunk, right? Or can you change the temperature? You could speak to it. You could say, maybe you could say to it like, like when I come home using FSD, it stops me. It's the car stops right at the front. Maybe I could say, actually, I want you to take the driveway, take it all the way down to the driveway. Don't drop me off the front in front of the mailbox, or drop me in front of the front, but in front of the mailbox, and I'll know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we're hoping it is with personalized interaction. I think that is. It learns from you, you'll learn from it, and it gets to know who you are. We might be reading way much into this, but I'm hoping that it's Grok embedded into the car. One of the questions I've been asking is, why hasn't Grok been embedded to the car yet? Why is it taking so long for that to happen? And I think one reason could be that they don't want you to just talk to Grok like you could with the LLM on an app and just ask it questions and it can give you answers. When was the fall of Rome, and it tells you. I think it's going to be more agentic, right? Which is it actually needs to be embedded into the apps, internal apps of the car, so that it can control the seats and control things.
Yeah. Like Sentry
Yeah.
mode, I guess, would be an internal, because that was what I was confused about a little bit. He says customers in his original tweet, and then he says
Yeah.
internal apps. So I'm like, okay, internal
Yeah.
meaning
Yeah.
Sentry mode, texting, calling. I mean, I guess internal would be any app on their app store. But yeah,
I thought
whatever.
internal app might have meant factory, like employees, just employees. But then, like you said, the first tweet, he said customers will soon
Yeah.
benefit. That's the thing, like customers? That's me.
Yeah.
I'm a customer.
Yeah. Well, there's 100% going to be Grok integration within Tesla at this point, right? I think that was already verified at some point a few months ago.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of when. Like you said, I think, it's maybe a bit superfluous if it's like, hey, what's the fall of Rome or stuff like that? You don't really need that sort of stuff. I think it'll still be able to do it. But I think there's 100% a partnership there with Colossus, with XAI and Tesla that's going to happen. I think it's going to be a bigger conversation. But that's more of a robotaxi point, is it not? Because do you really need a lot of the voice commands in the meantime before you have the driverless, or do you want to just wait for the driverless and then launch it? Because that's really when it's going to be mostly used, right?
I agree with you. Exactly. So the question that we're actually like figuring out right now, okay? So when Tesla launches robotaxi, will they or will they not need remote drivers? Okay? And my answer is they will need remote drivers, because that is, I think, the rule in most jurisdictions. That when you first, any robotaxi company comes in and says, I want to launch something, they'll say, prove it first with a supervised driver. And then once you show that works, you can then remove the driver, but I need you to have remote drivers. And then you can maybe reduce the remote driver per how many cars if you prove certain milestones. That's, I think, how it works. And so will Tesla have to have remote drivers? I highly believe that they will need to have that. It's like this idea that they won't have any remote driver. No. Now, if you had Grok installed, it can be like OnStar, right? You might be able to just talk to somebody, like maybe a live human at the beginning, but eventually, why need a lot? So was it Brian Wang was saying this, which makes a lot of sense. when you see Waymo and they're trying to expand, they have 700 cars. And then by the way, all of them, Baidu has 1,000 cars in China. They're the leader, and they're I think growing to 2,000 cars. They have remote drivers, and there's actually photos of the remote drivers. Like they're all sitting there like a game room with everybody having their own steering wheels, right? And you pick the car and then you take over, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so do you need that? But then when you scale, like Tesla's planning to scale, like we're not talking 50, 100 cars. We're talking about tens of thousands of cars per city,
Yeah.
and even eventually millions. You can't have one remote driver for 1,000 cars. You're going to need Grok. Grok
Mm.
will be the remote driver. So the person who will the entity that will understand what's going on and then send it to somebody who can help figure out what to do. But I think that they're going to build AIs to manage the AI, the FSD AI. So
It's a crazy timeline we're living in. A couple years ago, I will just say this. A couple years ago at the shareholder meeting, someone asked Elon about this, and they said,
yes, I remember this. Yep.
right? Someone
Yeah.
said, "Will you have in the edge case
Yeah.
scenarios? What
Yeah.
will you do? Will you have remote drivers?" And at
Yeah.
that time, I remember when I heard Elon's
Mm-hmm.
answer, I knew that we weren't really imminent on robotaxi because what he said was,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I guess, when if
Mm-hmm.
we get to that point where we need to, we can probably, yeah, I guess have one. And I was like, well, that doesn't really sound like
Yeah.
robotaxis are happening this year because you would have thought about that answer way more in depth if there was a
Yeah.
launch imminent. And I
Yes.
agree with you that first of all, Elon didn't want to just give him a carte blanche and be like, "Hey, engineers, don't worry about it. If you can't solve edge case scenarios, wh-
Exactly.
we have
Yeah.
we have a remote driver for you, right?"
Yeah.
But at the same time, he also knows like driving might be an asymptotic problem to solve. You get to 99.999,
Yeah.
but can you always solve 100% of the time, right?
No.
So having remote drivers, one for like you said, a couple hundred or whatever, that's totally fair. And I think Tesla will do that. They should do that because at the end of the day, it's not a big deal to have remote drivers. The bigger deal is if it's the majority of your drives,
Yeah.
and
Per
or you're
car.
misleading people to say that the majority of your drives are not being remote driven, they're actually just AI driven. So I have no problem with that personally.
And the majority of my drive right now is no need for human to intervene.
Yeah.
And but there's times like let's say I'm like I was heading to the border, right, from Seattle to Vancouver, and I wanted to take the Nexus lane.
Hmm.
And well, how do I tell that? If there's a grok in there, and I'll say take the Nexus lane, the car should a can read it, and that's the Nexus lane,
Yeah.
and will take us. How would the car know that
Yeah.
I am that the all the occupants? Yeah, one thing I was wishing the car knew was, I had two people in the car that we should be taking the HOV lane, and they didn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, somebody else told me that actually the card knows that because the card does know, and they just revealed this, right? They revealed this at the interview that Lars and Franz just had recently. That the car, the new Model Ys, it actually can track using some sort of radar in cabin. It could track how many humans are there, what their heartbeats are, how much they weigh, where they're sitting. And so this is all set up for robotaxi. That's another big conversation we can have, by the way. Everything that Tesla has done for the cars today that sets it up for robotaxi, it's like you can count all these little features they've added. But that one, so today the car in cabin should know that there's two people in the car. Does it not know that this is a Nexus, an HOV lane? Why didn't we take it? Anyway, somebody told me that it actually does do that. It's just that it happened on a my ride drive, and it was true. It wasn't that busy that we should have been on the HOV lane anyways. We
Yeah.
didn't need to. But I don't know if the car's smart enough. But if I said, please take the HOV lane, then
Mhm.
now Grok will know that that's what they're supposed to do. So it's a way for you to communicate back and forth with your car to tell it what to
Yeah.
do. So, yeah.
Unreal. Robo taxis, Tesla bots, Elon politics, Doge, Tesla energy we didn't even talk about. There's so much to talk about with Tesla, and I'm glad that you came on today. If everyone go check out Herbert's channel at Herbert Ong on X, and Brighter with Herbert on YouTube. Daily interviews. How many interviews are you doing
I
per
did
day
two a
now?
day.
Okay,
You
two a
said
day.
four or
So maybe
five.
now
I
you're doing
did
a
two
little
a
bit
day.
more. It depends on the day.
Yeah.
So two a day, and I think one of those is usually live streamed as well, right?
Yeah.
Cyber Bulls is. So yeah, everyone go check out Herbert's channel. Herbert, thank you for coming on, and always
Thank you,
appreciate your
Yashu.
time.
Appreciate it. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye. Sweet. Thanks for coming on.
No, thank you. That was good.